There comes a time when we have to stop negotiating with ourselves. We have to start embracing those irreversible shifts that lead to the most unapologetic, raw expressions of ourselves. This is Sexy Rebel Spirit, the private podcast by House of Andrea that drops live every single day into our exclusive Telegram space. If you're not in that space and you want to join the conversation, you'll find the link to it in the show notes. It's sexuality, it's rebellion, it's spirituality, and how these three things are simply the expression of who you are. This is your calibration portal, and this is where it all gets to change. So let's dive in. It has been a huge last few days, so I'm going to drop in with some transmissions here today. The first that I want to tune into and dive into is around the next step that I've been through on this journey with my body post-surgery, because on Friday I went and saw the surgeon for my 6-week checkup and had the final parts and pieces of the dressings and the tape removed from my body. So this was the final kind of serious checkup since having the surgery. And it was the first time where I've had all of the dressings removed, and I'm finally moving through the world with just my body. And I'm going to be really honest in that the 24 hours leading up to this last appointment, I was really tender. I was really tender. There were a few moments where I really broke down into tears. And the reason for this is because this process, whenever we go through something significant like this, it's been about not only recovering, not only facing having to go through something significant in terms of surgery, it is that process of really having to get deep into facing what it is that sits in our field, sits in our body, sits in our conditioning around how we feel about ourselves. It is that threshold that we have to cross that says, I am willing to finally be present with, be hyper present with everything that exists that is entangled with how I feel about myself. Anytime we have to deal with anything to do with the body, with our health, with our physical form, it is that moment where we can walk up to that threshold and say, yes, I'm willing to look at it. I'm willing to feel it. I'm willing to see what is really here. Or that alternative decision point of, I'm just going to go through this. I'm just going to heal. I'm just going to do what physically and practically I need to do to move through this. And I'm not going to look at that other stuff. But I knew coming into the back end of last year, that kind of late December period, and I got that intuitive message to go and cut my hair, and that strong download of you need less than you think you need. You need less than you think you need to find joy, to find peace, to find happiness, to find purpose in this life. You need less. That message was coming through so strongly that when I was faced with this decision of having to have this surgery, it was a no-brainer. It was a fundamental feeling and a knowing that rose within me that was like, now is the time to face all of these locked in beliefs, this stuff that was still encoded at a cellular level that I was letting stay there to separate me from really loving myself. And as they wheeled me off to surgery, and even the days prior to surgery, that feeling of like, please God, please universe, please angels, like, just help me love myself. Just help me love myself. And so coming up into this milestone on Friday around having to finally face the truth and the final kind of stripping back that was happening throughout this process with my body, to see the scars, to see the work that had been done. There was a lot that was churning through me the night before and the morning of Friday morning, just so many tears falling, just so much emotion coming up. It's so much questioning of, why do I still feel this way about myself? Why was it my journey to even feel this way about myself in the first place? Why does this have to be so hard? Those kind of questions just kept coming up and up and up all morning on Friday. And just that sadness, not even answering those questions, but that sadness that had been trapped in my body, in my bones, in my soul. That sadness of feeling like the answers to those questions were deep and heavy and agonizing and painful. And with them, the memories of those times where I felt awful in my body, where I felt judged, where I was judging my body, where I was judging my shape, where I was beating myself up for being born into a body that looked and developed in a certain way. All of that stuff was coming up. And I had that choice, not just at the start of the surgery, but again on Friday, of like, am I willing to feel this and look at this so that this can move on, so that this can move out? Because I don't want to carry this anymore. Like, we as humans are so incredibly good at locking story, feeling, belief away in our bodies that sometimes it's not until we go through these significant experiences, events, uncoverings that make us realize what we have buried, what we have shoved down so deep and become so high functioning at holding. We don't realize this incredible proficiency that we have in being able to do this until we're faced, until we're standing on that cliff edge, until we're standing in that moment of having to make the choice of either feeling it, embracing it, and allowing it to move through us, or just allowing it to stay locked and stay buried. And so when I was getting ready to go to this appointment at Friday, I think it was a 10:30 a.m. appointment. We had to leave around 9:30 to be able to get there in time. Between my waking hours, which I think was about 5 a.m., and having to depart at 9:30, that time was just, it was filled with tears, to be honest. It was filled with thinking back to when I was 13, 14, developing in my body, and just absolutely willing that breast to grow, absolutely willing my body to form in a way that all the other women, all the other girls around me's bodies were developing, to will the excess weight to drop away, to will myself to have a tan, to will myself, like all of these expectations and wishes that I had put on myself to feel like I could just skate under the radar. I could just be accepted as normal. I could just be looked at and loved and adored for who I was, without feeling like this deformed, alien, uncool, antisocial, awkward person that I was. It was just all of this willing that was happening around that time that continued right up until I had the surgery at age 19. Like, I didn't have this corrected until 19. And so for all of those years of growth, there was just this willing that was happening constantly, day in, day out, that was getting encoded and locked into my cells, because you go through an experience of shame, of embarrassment, of clothing not fitting right, of, no one really knew, but I assumed they all knew. Like, I assumed they all knew and that they were laughing at me. And, we didn't grow up. We grew up quite poor as well. And so I just had all of these stories of like, I can't even get nice, fancy, label expensive clothing to cover over these things. Like, there's just this constant willing that was happening that just got locked so deep in my cells that when it came to allowing myself to feel the emotion that was coming up on Friday, all of that was there. All of that was bubbling up to the surface. So it wasn't just a case of today I have to go and have the dressings removed and look at the scars. It was like, today I have to look at the scars, like those deep, intrinsic wounds and beliefs. I have to feel all of that when my eyes fall upon these breasts, fall upon these scars. Like all of that has to be held today. And there was a decision that I made in the morning of like, today's the day when I get to hold myself, or I get to hold all of these feelings, all of these emotions, all of this stuff that is coming up. I'm choosing to be in a place where I get to finally hold it. I get to finally embrace it and love it and accept it and allow it to move. Because it's something that's really interesting that happens in this energetic work is that we feel the resistance to wanting to feel it and own it. That word ownership. It's like I feel resistant to having to own this trauma, this feeling, this emotion. But the incredible thing is, as soon as we make that decision to own it, it moves and it goes, which is incredible. We are often stuck in that thought that ownership is synonymous with anchoring, with embedding, with like, now you're stuck with it type energy. And so we avoid that role of ownership. We avoid that important function of having to say, yes, I own this. Because as soon as we own it, it moves and it becomes something else. And this is why in this personal development space and in this work, we can actually process and move through things so quickly. I did an episode on this recently about how we get to move with source and how things can shift and change at lightning speed when we allow ourselves to own and hold and embrace and feel this stuff. So I made that decision of like, I'm going to own this. I'm going to own this as part of my story. I'm going to own this energy. And it wasn't even, I'm going to own this so it can move type decision. I mean, I knew that was going to happen. So I didn't have to actually mentally declare that. Instead, I chose to just mentally say, I'm going to own this. I'm going to own this and I'm going to feel this and I'm going to embrace this. Because that like full stop on the end of I'm going to own this is kind of like sending that signal to your soul and to your body and to your energy that says, I'm serious. Like I'm serious about this ownership. This isn't like a lip service thing. I'm serious about looking at this and owning this, and at whatever level that I need to work with it, I'm going to do that. At the deepest possible level, I mean. Like I'm going to do what it takes to own this at that level as a certain, confident signal that just is. And so that's exactly what I did. And it took me into the tears. Oh my gosh, the tears on Friday, the depths of like that visceral memory of owning this and feeling this like it was real, like I was back in that time. And it wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it was also like delicious. There is something about allowing those tears to fall, that pain to rise, even although it feels heavy and devastating. There's also a deliciousness to that because you're like, I am really feeling this. I am really alive. And you realize I am really capable of feeling this alive. I am really capable of holding this energy at this level. And in those moments, I was like, yes, I am here. I am present. I am in my body. This is what love feels like. This is what self-love looks like. Because self-love ultimately is us being willing to just sit and own and love regardless of all the intricacies, of all of the intertwined density of the emotion, self-love is willing to be able to hold ourselves through that. And so in that moment, I was like, yes, I've got me. I've got me, and I'm just going to allow these tears to fall. I'm just going to allow the fear of what is this going to look like? What is the final outcome? Because I was starting from such asymmetrical shapes and asymmetrical material in terms of the distribution of fat tissue and positioning and everything, like I was dealing or coming into this surgery with such mixed matched tissue and material that, that question of what is this going to look like? How do I love myself with this? How do I learn how to embrace what my body is going to look like? Those questions were coming up to the surface, and the answer just had to be whatever it is, I'm going to choose to love it, because I have one body in this lifetime's experience. And I don't want to constantly have to, bow down and slave to these expectations, these false expectations that we create as a society of what a body has to look like to be sexy, to be attractive, to be accepted, to be worthy of love. Like all of that stuff is just a manufactured concept of what we think normal is based on old models of marketing and selling. Like the reason why things were sexualized, the things that were considered good or not good, was based on either having to attract, having to sell off your daughter for a cow to someone to secure your family's future. Like we go way back, making your daughter as beautiful, as attractive, as appealing, as perfect as possible so that you could trade her. That was a standard norm. And then, fast forward, all of that got all mixed up with like commercialization and advertising and marketing and consumerism. And so we've kind of carried through or set these standards that have slightly morphed and changed, but they're still fairly consistent over the years of like, this is what attractive is, this is what sexy is, this is what acceptable is, in exchange to get something, in exchange to get a husband, in exchange to get attraction, in exchange to sell or be represented in a certain way or acquire a certain something. Like it's all about the exchange and the value that gets placed on that. And so I had to say to myself, no matter what those standards are, no matter what the societal expectations are, I'm going to choose to love me. No matter what the outcome is with the raw material that they're working on, I choose self-love. And it was like this firm declaration that I made Friday morning, because this was the whole point of this journey. I went into this journey at the start of January with the declaration and the self-promise of self-love, of loving myself no matter what. And so I wasn't about to start undoing that with some of these fears that were surfacing on Friday morning. I wasn't going to drop back into the commercialization, into the socialization, into the expectations or the things that feel safer or normal. I'm not going to start dropping back into that now. When I started the hard work back in January, or honestly, when I started the hard work decades ago, in this journey with my body, this is the final surgery that is reverting me back. But I have been working on this love of self for decades, and this surgery is just that catalyst to do the final pieces, to really take me into the deepest work that I've had to do yet to get me back into that place of self-love. And so I turned up. My husband, my beautiful, beautiful husband, drove me to my appointment, even although I knew I could drive myself because I'm finally feeling comfortable enough to drive. But he said to me, he looked at me in the morning. I said, look, you don't have to come. And he goes, no, I'm invested in you. I'm invested in you. And that made me break down and cry, because it was the first time I'd heard a man in a relationship that I had been in say that to that level of depth of care before. And as women, quite often we find it hard to accept love and support and help. And I knew this was this beautiful moment, orchestrated both by the universe, but also just by this beautiful, loving relationship that I am in with him. I knew it was a moment to just surrender and say, thank you. Thank you. I accept that graciously. Thank you for being so graciously in love with me and willing to support me on this journey. And I could have fought it. I could be like, well, I don't want to put you out, and it could be boring, like the surgeon could be running late, and like, you don't have to drive me, or I know it's the middle of the workday. And he's like, no, I'm invested. I'm invested in you. I'm invested in your health. So let's go. Like, it wasn't even a question, really. And I just took that moment, took that breath, and was like, okay, let's go. So we got in the car and we were driving, and I was just talking to him on the way, and I was just sharing with him, like, I feel really nervous. Like, I can feel the emotion still coming up as I tell you about this, as this energy continues to move, and it will continue to move over the next days, months, weeks, however long it needs to take. But I was just saying to him, like, I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid of what I'm going to see, not because of the scars. Like, I'm used to scars. I've had surgeries, so many surgeries over the years. I'm not afraid of the scars, but I'm afraid of what the scars represent in terms of the shame, in terms of the sadness, in terms of, like, even having to just saying to him, like, there's still so much sacred anger here around even having to deal with this in the first place. Like, why couldn't I have just been not born normally? And of course, I know from a soul perspective, there's always a reason why things happen to us on our journey. But it didn't mean I wasn't momentarily in that anger of, like, why is this happening? Why me? But from a deep sadness, I'm being cavalier about it now, but from a deep sadness perspective on that drive on the way over, I'm like, I'm afraid of having to face this again. I'm afraid of what I'm going to see. I'm afraid that it's not going to be symmetrical. Because this is the other thing that we tend to chase as a society, is perfection in terms of things looking balanced, things that are matching, things that are perfect, things that are paired. There's this real, and even in nature too, we seek this balance, this beauty that happens in balance. And I was like, what if they're not balance? Like, I kept saying, I don't think I can deal with this. I don't think I can do this again. Like, I don't think I can go back to feeling that way. And of course, that was just fear talking. I know I can handle anything and everything. There is nothing in my life or that could happen in my life that I couldn't handle. That is a deep knowing. And I know that because I know. Like, that is just an unspoken truth that exists. It's just the wobbles and the fear and the vernacular and the verbal diatribe that happens over the top of that based on the fear that makes us say things like, I don't think I could, or I can't, or I don't want to, or I don't know how I would. That kind of language is simply the fear being verbalized and getting some airtime. But deep in our soul, we know we can handle it all. We know we are built and born in a way that can just move through anything. And we often prove to that ourselves over and over and over. And even as the emotion moves, as we feel it, as the rage comes up, as we sometimes feel like we're drowning in the emotion, it moves, and inevitably we come back to that place of, we know, because we know that we've got this, that we can do anything. And so even as these words are pouring out, I'm like, I've got this feeling of like, it's going to be fine, because it's going to be fine. And so we sat in the waiting room, and the surgeon was running late. And that's always tricky, that extra waiting time. Like sometimes it's easier when things are like bang, 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 bang. You know, you don't have time to think about it. But there's also beauty in the universe always putting these, not roadblocks, but these moments of pause or moments of waiting in our path, because it allows us to sit in the emotion longer, to agitate through anything else that needs to rise to the surface. So as I was sitting in the waiting room, there was other like, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about that type memory associated with this asymmetry, with this surgery, with how I'd felt about myself in the past. Like, oh, and there's also this one, there's also this one. And so it was kind of like giving me space in the waiting room to collect up these other memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, putting them kind of into the bubble or into the field of what this represented so that it could move. Rather than only doing like 50% of the work, it's like allowing everything that needs to come up to come up. And then we went into the session, and my surgeon is lovely and he really deeply cares. And so we went through the process of like, how have you been going? And we talked about it on the surface level. And then, of course, the moment of truth came where I had to go take my top off, take my bra off, and let him have a look at the have a look at the work, then start taking those final pieces of tape off, which up until this point for the last 3.5 weeks have been taped over all of the incision lines, which I have quite a lot of incision lines. So I've been taped over sort of all of those areas, which has meant that over the last few weeks, that work that I've been doing to spend time in the mirror to really just love and appreciate my body in its new form, it's still kind of been masked. So this was him kind of like removing those last layers of masks. And of course, there wasn't a mirror there at the time, but he was just talking through. He's like, the scars are great. He's like, they've been healing really well. The type of dressing that I'd opted for back at the start of the surgery, I had like done this amazing healing process. You know, there was no issues, a lot of the swelling's going down, and they were starting the process, which is going to take 12 months, but they were starting the process of settling into place and becoming their final shape and their final form. But given that we're working with different types of fat tissue distribution on both sides, like if you think about if you've ever experienced breast asymmetry, there is a genetic thing that's happening there where tissue is developing. It's almost like, particularly in my case, if you look at a male chest, a man's chest, and a female's chest, the tissue distribution is quite different. In a man's chest, it might be firmer. It might form a slightly different shape, convex versus concave. And on a woman's, it's softer and it kind of molds outwards and around. And so if you imagine someone who has asymmetry like myself, it's like you have very masculine dominated tissue on one side and feminine on the other. And so whilst my surgeon was incredibly brilliant at working and recreating and carving and shaping and crafting these beautiful breasts, he was working with different types of tissue on both sides. And so there's still, even although honestly, comparatively, it looks so beautiful and it looks incredible, and I'm really grateful for the work that he's done. It's not perfect. It's not that perfection, that level of symmetry and perfection that we often seek. We can't achieve that because we're working with different levels of tissue and different levels of material. And so I had that moment of like, it's not perfect. It's still not perfect. I'm still in a place where I have different subtle, like honestly, very, very subtle. He's done an amazing job. But to me, who, like, with all admittance, has lived with that seeking of perfection in their life and is a recovering perfectionist, there's like the scars are different because I had two different procedures on two different sides of my chest. I had an implant removal on one side and I had a complete like reconstruction removal of natural tissue on the other. The scars are very different. They're long on one side, short on another. One goes up and around and over. The other one is, different in different directions. So I have these bright pink scars that go in different directions on different sides of me because I've basically gone in for different procedures on both sides. And so I'm looking at it and I'm like, the scars are so different, and I just felt that rise of emotion of wanting to cry, that old language of I'm deformed, I'm different, I'm back there again. Like the mind wants to go back into that familiar story because it's been so ingrained, and you'll feel this within yourself too. It's like, I go back there. It's like I'm right back there in that emotion, in that situation, in that experience. But you're not. It's just a familiar pattern of brain chemical and brain pathways playing out that makes it feel very real. And so I was looking at the scars and I'm like, gosh, they're so different on both sides. And now I have to try and heal all of these different incision lines. And so that wanted to drag me back momentarily into that emotion. And then if you want to nitpick, which my mind wanted to do instantly, is like, well, because I'm dealing with different material on either side, it's like, oh, this one sort of goes around this way slightly, whereas this one goes around this other way slightly. And so my mind wanted to start to find all of the reasons why the symmetry isn't perfect, why they felt different on each side. And it was very interesting because that emotion wanted to come up, that beration wanted to start to tell me a story about how I'm still deformed and imperfect and never going to be good enough and blah, 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 blah. Like the story started. And I just let it come up and then move. Because fundamentally, like I said, my promise to myself is I'm going to love myself no matter what. Please God, please universe, help me love myself. No matter what happens on the other side of this surgery, I choose to love myself. That was the intention. That was the prayer that was set. And so when all this started swirling on Friday with the surgeon, of course I'm like holding it back because I didn't want all of this outpouring to happen in front of this medical professional, which I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm just saying that was a choice that I made because I knew that I wasn't shutting that emotion down to never be felt again. I was simply holding the emotional field to be able to process it once I stepped out of that room, because I knew that I am the kind of person that knows how to emotionally process without squishing it down, never to be seen again, like just shoving it back down into that cellular level of like being very high functioning at being able to keep it there, but just holding it so that I could fall apart outside of the room and let the emotion move. But my mind wanted to keep dragging me back into that. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. I'm still broken. It's not perfect. But I just held on to that remembrance of no, my promise to myself, and I refused to break my promise to myself, was I choose to love myself no matter what. I choose to love this body. That is my mission. That is my purpose. And so I held on to that and allowed that emotion to move through me. And as we left the surgery and we drove home, and Matt and I talked about it, and I let some of that emotion come up and just move through. We talked about it and talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And I had that moment, that feeling of like, I don't want to look at them again. Like I'm not ready to look at them. Like I'm disappointed. I wish it was different. Why couldn't it be better? Like I let all of that kind of like move through. And I chose that day not to look at them again, like just to go and have a normal day and do something fun and not think about it. Just be grateful that they were healing well, and just kind of put myself into that energy of like, it's okay. There's still joy here. There's still love here. There's still peace here. There's still things to, like, not to be dramatic, but just that thought of like, there's still so much here in my life to be grateful for. Like choose that energy for the rest of the day. And then the next morning I got up and I was like, no, I am going to spend time now choosing to love them, choosing to spend time looking at them, appreciating them, being grateful for them, because they were no longer making me sick. The things that had been poisoning me, that had been impacting my health for such a long time, that was gone. The like needing to have something artificial in my body to balance out an asymmetry that had caused me so much pain and trauma and grief when I was a teenager, that was gone. Like this, what was left was my flesh, my body, the things that I had naturally been born with, just slightly worked with. But I'd made that choice to go back to a form that was as natural and as close to me as possible with the material that I had in my body. And I was like, now is the time to choose to love that. And so Saturday, I got up and I was like, nope, as much as I'm resisting this, I'm gonna have a good look. And no matter what I see, I'm going to allow any energy and emotion to move. And I'm going to choose to love it anyway. And that's exactly what I did. I got up and it's weird to say, oh, I spent time looking at my breasts in front of the mirror. But that's exactly what I did, because that's exactly what was needed. So I got up and I spent time just appreciating them. And here's the really interesting thing. So those emotions that I had felt, the things that I thought I'd saw in the doctor's surgery, because he took a photo and then we brought it up on the computer, and then my husband and I were sitting there talking to him about it, and he was saying that this is different, that's different, this is the reason why, and you may not ever be this and that. So it was very clinical. But when I got up Saturday morning with my eyes and my space and my chosen intention, all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, these are actually really good breasts. The symmetry that I was chasing, it's not that big of a deal. The differences is so subtle that I know they're different. But I put a different bra on and a t-shirt on, and I'm like, oh, nobody's going to know these differences. And I went and got my husband, and then we were standing there having a chat about it, having a look. And he's like, they're amazing. They're gorgeous. They're great. The shock of seeing them for the first time, and, having that anticipation and that willingness of I just need them to be perfect, otherwise I'm not going to survive type fear that was on board on the Friday, because it was so tied to that teenager, pubescent, just desperation to fit in, to feel attractive, to be attractive to others. All of that stuff was so entangled and needing to move, which is what it was doing on Friday, has gone. And so when I looked at it as, a spiritual, confident, rebellious, sexy woman in her 40s on Saturday morning who was willing to just choose self-love over everything else, and was able to process emotion and not buy into the conditioning, totally different experience. And so I finally am coming back to this place of there's scars that go in different directions and at different lengths because of different significantly major procedures that happened on either side of my body. But it's scars fade. I had a look at some of the other scars on my body. I've had an appendectomy, I've had a hysterectomy, I've had a bunch of major surgeries in my body, and I had a look at those scars and I'm like, oh, I can barely see them. They've faded up over the years, and they didn't have the level of sophisticated plastic surgery dressings that I had this time. So these scars are going to be brilliant. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's all going to fade. Also, not planning on being a topless model anytime soon. So what does it matter? I now have these beautiful breasts that are all me. There's nothing else artificial in them. I've had a surgeon who's like the Da Vinci of breast architecture working on me. Yeah, okay, maybe it's a tiny little bit different on this angle, and there's maybe one's going slightly rounder on this side versus slightly different on this side, but you're not going to know it unless I like get a pen out and I'm like, so you see this little part here? Well, this part is slightly different. If you got the measuring tape out on the other side, it's like, I just made this choice over the weekend to like drop the chase for symmetry, to drop the chase of perfection. Because we're dealing with the human body, which really is not, it's not molded out of plastic. I mean, unless it has been. But naturally, bodies aren't molded out of plastic. Nothing's perfect anyway. So why am I chasing that? Like, it just became an absurd pursuit in the end because I had allowed myself to feel all the things that needed to be felt, to face all of the expectations and the pressure and the conditioning that I, again, had buried so deep within me that I became so high functioning at holding that it became normal and expected behavior and patterning of mine, that I allowed all of that to like be seen and agitate up and felt and get angry about and pour the tears out about, that now I'm just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Once I get through, there's still some pain and discomfort because it's only been 6 weeks. But once I get through the physical recovery and the scars start to fade and I go shopping and buy new things that fit, that feel like they are representative of this new identity, this new sexiness, this new rebellion, this new spiritual side of me that is purely just an expression of my life force moving through me. Like, this is just going to be another incredible, beautiful part of the journey that I move through. I'm not going to worry about it. And if things continue to shift and change, and there are days where I notice the differences or the imperfections, it's like, I'm just going to see them with love. I'm just going to see them as, sometimes the most beautiful pieces of art in the world are imperfect. It's where the slip has happened or the bump has happened, or where the artist has left something raw and real that makes it so incredibly perfect in its imperfection. Like, that's how I'm going to see my body now. And of course, there's always things about our bodies that we want to change. But we can love our bodies at such a deep level that when the changes happen, it's not the make or break of that relationship. Like, of course, I've gained kilos at the moment. Not a huge amount, but enough to be uncomfortable in myself because it's different to how I normally feel in my body. And of course, I feel those things at the moment and I'm going to work on changing them, but not from that place of I'm imperfect without it, but from that place of like, my health is better if I get those extra kilos off. But I'm going to give my body the grace to be able to heal before I start putting it through like crazy diets or exercises to try and get it to a space that, or a shape that avoids a feeling of being broken. It's like, no, I'm just going to go on this journey right now. If I need to like eat something to feel good and I can't work out as hard because I can't lift heavy things yet across my chest, like, it's going to be what it is. It's all going to be part of the journey and it's all going to be okay. And then when I'm stronger and fitter and healthier, then I'll start embracing some of that stuff. But I'm not going to do it a second earlier than is right or is part of the perfect, not perfect, but is part of the journey that I'm meant to be on, simply to avoid feeling something or simply to do something out of fear of being judged by an external place or even by an internal place. So it's been a wild weekend. I am happy to say that I am enjoying spending time looking at my breasts every single day to appreciate the braveness the bravery, the courage, the willingness to go on this journey with myself, because I could have kicked this down the line out of fear, or I could have done a million different things, but I chose a journey of no matter what, I'm going to love myself. I chose to do the hard thing. I chose to face the imperfections and the asymmetry of myself that I had been avoiding and hated and angry about for such a long time, to choose this journey of self-love, to go through this process that I'm going to allow any emotion that comes up to come up and feel it, because I'm worth it. And so if you're facing anything at the moment that is taking you into the depths of emotion like this, it is making you confront things from your past, just know through this story that there is always a pathway through it where you get to love yourself, where you get to go into the depths of this. You get to face things that you think are impossible, that you think that you've never been able to face, and source that power that exists within you, that remembrance that you know because you know, and you are because you are, and you are incredible. And you have the power to face and move through anything that you're going through, to love your body at new levels of depth that you never thought was possible, which then allows you to just express it in the truth of what it is, in that sexiness, in that spirituality, in that fire, in that rebellion, in that expression that has been crying out to you from a soul level for such a long time to finally be expressed. You can do that too. You have got it within you to be able to do it. And all this story is doing is helping you remember that part of you, helping you remember that piece of you, because you are so, so worth it. So I'm going to leave this transmission here today. It's been a big one. I'll be back in here tomorrow with lots of other things that have unfolded over the course of the weekend. But just know that I see you. You are not alone in this. You have got this. Your soul knows what to do. Your soul knows how to hold this, and you can find your way back to self-love in any single moment, in any single situation, because you are incredible. I love you, and I will see you in the next transmission. If you're not in there yet and you want to get into the private Telegram space where all of these audios drop every day, as well as all the art, the conversation, and the behind the scenes, go to www.andrealeemathies.com/private podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at Andrea Lee Matthies, and you can find more about me and all of my work at andrealeemathies.com. I'll see you in the next transmission.